Hey everyone, it's Azim. We are going to go over all the different regions of the body. We want to give very technical names for different regions of the body because we don't want to just refer to one place as one thing while someone else refers to the same place as another thing. That gets really confusing. So we want to have a common language to refer to different body parts. Let's start with the head. The whole head you can refer to as the cephalic region. Cephalic means head region. The head itself can be broken down into several different regions. So in the cephalic region, the very big part that protects the brain is the cranium, while the front part, the anterior part, that's your facial region. Let's look a little more closely at the facial region. The forehead, that can be called the frontal region. Frontal region. Around the eyes, since it forms a circle, that's the orbital region. It could also be called the ocular region. The nose is the nasal region, nasal. The cheek is buccal, B-U-C-C-A-L, buccal region. The mouth is the oral, O-R-A-L, oral region. The chin is the mental region. Think about like when you're deep in thought, like, what is it, Michelangelo's David? Put your hand on your chin and you're thinking hard. That's the mental region. The ear has a few names. It can be called otic, O-T-I-C. It can also be called the auricular, A-U-R-I-C-U-L-A-R, auricular region. The back of the head, so now we're getting to the cranial part. The back of the head is known as the occipital region. Occipital region. The neck, which is cut off here, so we'll have to now refer to our other model. The neck region, that is the cervical region. Cervical, C-E-R-V-I-C-A-L. The cervical region is the beginning of the spinal regions. So here we have, again, the cervical region. This middle portion, which is consistent with where the ribs are, this is the thoracic region. Thoracic region, and this is where you have your thoracic cavity, which we'll get to in a minute. The lower part, the lower back is the lumbar region. The entire back can be referred to as the dorsum, the dorsal region. If we're looking at the front, the anterior side of the thoracic region, like the cephalic region, can be divided into several parts. In the thoracic region, the midline, this is the sternum, the bone, so this is the sternal region. On either side, you've got pectoral muscles. This is the pectoral region. It can also be called the mammary region. The armpits, now we're moving a bit to the shoulders. The armpits, that's called the axillary, A-X-I-L-L-A-R-Y, axillary region. The point where your collarbone meets your scapula, so basically this point here where the collarbone and scapula meet, this is the acromial region, acromial. Where you find this large shoulder muscle, which is called the deltoid, so this is the deltoid region. Now moving along the arms, we've gone from the deltoid region. You can see the deltoid ending here. This whole upper arm region is called the brachial region, B-R-A-C-H-I-A-L, brachial region. The anterior elbow is called the antecubital, A-N-T-E-C-U-B-I-T-A-L, antecubital region. The forearm is called the antebrachial, A-N-T-E-B-R-A-C-H-I-A-L. The prefix ante means before. Like if you've heard of antebellum America, that's before the Civil War. Ante means before, A-N-T-E. So antecubital is behind or before the elbow, antebrachial before the brachial region. The wrist is known as the carpal region. Maybe you've heard of carpal tunnel. The carpal tunnel is a literal passageway where tendons and nerves pass through on this side. There's a tunnel in the wrist region, carpal region. The whole hand is known as the manus, that's the noun, or the manual region. Like if you read a manual, it's doing something by hand. There's probably another reason for that, but this is the manual region. The hand can be divided into different parts. Each of these are known as digits or digital region, and the thumb has a very special term for it. The thumb is the pollex, P-O-L-L-E-X. The thumb is the pollex. If we're numbering them, thumb is 1, pollex is 1, the pointer is 2, middle is 3, ring is 4, pinky is 5. So these are the digital regions of the manual region, and specifically that's the pollex. The way I remember this is the pollex goes to the palm of your hand. The palm of your hand is the palmar region. On the back of the arm, I said that the anterior elbow was antecubital. The pointy part of your elbow is olecranal, O-L-E-C-R-A-N-A-L, olecranal. Olecranal region versus antecubital. I'll get to the abdominal region last because there's several other regions to mention beyond just abdominal pelvic region. Getting down to the groin area, this can be known as the inguinal, I-N-G-U-I-N-A-L, inguinal region, can also be known as the iliac region. The upper thigh, the upper leg, this is known as the femoral region. The knee, the front anterior knee is known as the patellar region, which is where you have your patella. The lower leg, this is known as the crural, C-R-U-R-A-L, crural region. Getting down to the feet, that is, the whole foot is the pedal region. The ankle, I forgot about the ankle. The ankle is the tarsal region. So you've got carpals for your wrist and tarsals for your ankles. Once again, tarsals for the ankle, pedal for the whole foot. Just like the fingers, the toes are also called the digital regions. So toes are also digital. The heel is calcaneal. The heel is calcaneal. The bone here is called the calcaneus. The heel is calcaneal. Once again, the toes are also called digitals. The big toe is known as the hallux, H-A-L-L-U-X. Thumb is pollex to the palm. Big toe is hallux, it's by the heel. Whoops. All right. We have a few more things on the leg. Forgot to mention, if this in the front anterior portion, the shin region, is crural, the lateral portion, that's fibular, because this is where the fibula bone is. Crural, fibular. The back, the calf region, is sural, S-U-R-A-L, sural region. The back of the knee, that is the popliteal region, P-O-P-L-I-T-E-A-L, popliteal. A few more things I forgot to point out on the back. Once again, here we have cervical. Thoracic is this whole region. Lumbar is this lower region. The very low triangular portion here where the sacrum is, this is the sacral region. The butt, that's the gluteal region. Underneath, between the anus and genitalia, that's the perineal region, P-R-I-N-E-A-L. Where the shoulder blades are, that's the scapular region. The whole thing can be referred to, the whole back is the dorsal region. Finally, the abdominal pelvic areas. So at the end of the sternum, where the diaphragm is right here, this is the abdominal pelvic cavity, well, if we were to cut in. And these are the abdominal pelvic regions. So we can refer to regions of the abdominal pelvic area specifically. One way to divide this up is to divide it up by quadrants. So imagine a line down here and a line right here. We have 4 quadrants. They're named pretty simply. This is the right side, so this is the right upper quadrant, right lower quadrant, left upper quadrant, left lower quadrant. Pretty standard. What kind of organs do we find deep to here? We would find the liver and gallbladder. In the left upper, we'd find the stomach and spleen. In the right lower, this is where you find your appendix and the beginning of the large intestines, the cecum. In the left lower, you'd find the end of the intestines. And in all these parts, you can find lots of overlapping things. In fact, let me pull this off. So you can see more clearly the organs you can see inside of the abdominal pelvic quadrant. Once again, liver was mostly in the upper left, but it kind of peeks into the upper right, but it kind of peeks into the upper left. Same with the stomach. It's mostly upper left, but it peeks into the upper right. Intestines goes all over the place. Here's the large intestines. Here's the small intestines. It weaves all around. And there are more organs deep to these. So that's one way to divide up the abdominal pelvic cavity, abdominal pelvic organs, is by quadrants. And also divided up by regions. There are 4 quadrants, as the name implies. Quad means 4, but there are 9 regions. So we're just getting even more specific. So if you can imagine like a tic-tac-toe hash, 2 lines here, 2 lines here. This upper right one, this is called the hypochondriac, right hypochondriac region. Right because it's on the right side, hypo, it's below, chondriac, the prefix chondro, C-H-O-N-D-R-O, is referring to cartilage, and there are ribs right here, and the ribs connect to the sternum with cartilage. So this is the right hypochondriac region. So you find a bit of the liver here and the gallbladder. Below the right hypochondriac, inferior to it, this is the right lumbar. I know lumbar means lower back, and you think it would be lower, but this is too low. This is the groin. If you look here, we are in the lower back. Right lumbar. If we remove the intestines, you'd see the kidneys behind it. So the kidneys are mostly in the lumbar region. Right inguinal or right iliac region. This is where you see the cecum, the appendix. So once again, right hypochondriac, right lumbar, right inguinal. We have the same thing on the other side. Left hypochondriac, left lumbar, left inguinal. Down the midline, we have, let's start in the middle. This is the umbilical region, which is where you'd have your belly button. Above that is the epigastric. It's above the stomach. Well, here's the stomach, but it includes it actually. It's not quite above it. It includes it. This is the epigastric, umbilical, and then hypogastric, or pubic, where you find your urinary bladder and internal genitalia. A few more things I wanted to point out are these cavities. You see the thoracic cavity that contains the lungs, heart, and major blood vessels, esophagus, and trachea. That's thoracic cavity. It's separated by the diaphragm to the abdominal pelvic cavity. And you have a bunch of organs in the abdominal pelvic cavity. Those are considered the major anterior cavities. You've got within the thoracic cavity, the lungs themselves are within another cavity. Each lung is within a pleural cavity, P-L-E-U-R-A-L. The right pleural cavity has the right lung, the left lung is in the left pleural cavity. It's in a separated cavity because it needs to be surrounded by a serous membrane. Surrounding this lung is a special serous membrane called the pleural membrane, and that helps reduce friction as the lungs constantly inflate and deflate. Similarly, the heart needs to be in a separate cavity. If the lungs are in a separate cavity, this whole middle cavity, which includes the heart, aorta, vena cava, trachea, esophagus, this whole middle cavity is called the mediastinum, M-E-D-I-A-S-T-I-N-U-M. But the heart is then within another cavity. The heart is within the pericardial cavity, and that is surrounded by its own membrane, its own serous membrane called the pericardial membrane. So, to say that one more time, the heart is in the pericardial cavity, surrounded by pericardial membrane. The pericardial cavity is within the mediastinum, which does not have a membrane. The mediastinum and the pleural cavities have serous membranes. The mediastinum and the pleural cavities are within the thoracic cavity. There's something similar going on with the abdominal pelvic cavity. This whole thing is the abdominal pelvic cavity, and you've got a bunch of organs in here. Many of these organs, including the liver, stomach, parts of the intestines like the jejunum and ileum, and parts of the large intestines are covered, like this transverse one, are covered by a serous membrane, just like the heart and lungs. This serous membrane that's covering these organs is called the peritoneal membrane, Peritoneal, peritoneal membrane. These organs can move around a lot, and we can move our trunk a lot, so we want to also reduce friction in these areas. There's a bunch of organs, though, that are not surrounded by the peritoneal membrane. You'll notice how this part of the large intestines is coming out at us, but this is called the ascending colon, and this is the descending colon. These parts of the intestines are actually behind the membrane. So the term for these organs is that they're retroperitoneal. They're behind the peritoneal membrane. There are other organs that are retroperitoneal. Oops. If we're looking again at our organs here, this is the pancreas and this is the duodenum. The pancreas here and the duodenum are also retroperitoneal. The kidneys are also retroperitoneal. The kidneys on either side are also retroperitoneal, as is the rectum, and as well as the adrenal glands, which are on top of the kidneys. There's an acronym that you can remember, and I hope I get it all right now. SADPUCKER. SADPUCKER stands for suprarenal, which means adrenal gland. Aorta. Here's the aorta. And vena cava, this inferior vena cava, they're retroperitoneal. D is for the duodenum, which I showed you all right here. Here's the duodenum, which is where the stomach leads into. The P is the pancreas. Again, here's our pancreas. U is ureter, which is what's coming out of the kidneys. C is for parts of the colon. So it would be the ascending colon and descending colon, and the ascending and descending colon. K is for kidneys. E is for esophagus. This is a cut esophagus where the stomach would be. And R is for rectum. I did it. SADPUCKER. All those organs are retroperitoneal. They're behind the peritoneal membrane. They're still in the abdominal cavity, but they're not within the peritoneal membrane. Kind of like how the heart is in the mediastinum, but the heart has its own membrane and cavity, not like the aorta and superior vena cava and esophagus and trachea. So that was a lot to go over. Oh, one more thing. There are more cavities, of course. There is a cranial cavity. The cranial cavity holds the brain. Also a spinal cavity, which is better shown on this model. The spinal cavity over here. Both the cranial and spinal cavities are considered dorsal cavities, because if you look at the body from the side, the head would be right here. It's more dorsal. So here's the head, continue on to the spine. These are the largest of the dorsal cavities, and they're protecting the brain and spinal cord. All right, a lot to digest, no pun intended. Hope that helps.